So here we are then, our very first day of base training. It's reasonably early in the morning here in Menorca on the beautiful Mediterranean, and it's a nice day today. And here we are, Andre Turcat, which is our Airbus A320. Here's a little thing for you. Do you know who Andre Turcat was? Here's a little pilot question for you.
I'm actually not 100% sure.
Okay. Do you have a suspicion?
Is it something to do with a very fast aircraft?
It is.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah, okay.
All right, so basically all of our Airbus fleet are named after famous aviators. Andre Turcat was one of the test pilots for Concorde.
Okay.
There you go.
See, another sort of Airbus.
Yeah, another Airbus.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people feel that Concorde kind of died and vanished, but actually an awful lot of the technology from Concorde eventually ended up in the Airbus, right?
Exactly. If you actually look at the wheels between the Airbus and the Concorde, they're almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
They had the same design, everything. They was all come from the Airbus.
So an awful lot of the Concorde technology found its way into this airplane.
Yeah, and in fact, they actually flew a Concorde. Could have been him himself with a side stick.
Yeah.
So just because they were coming up with the idea then.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so there you go. Andre Turcat, which is our Airbus A320, and this is the one that we're going to take off here for our training flight. So here she is at rest, and at the moment she's cold and dark. And I guess this is where we need to get inside and start setting things up, and then we're going to do a walk around and do some other things. So you're the first person on the airplane.
First person, yeah.
It needs a bit of a wash, Andre Turcat, doesn't it, really?
It's a bit dirty, isn't it?
Yeah,
but I'd have to say that's fairly standard.
Yeah, I'm afraid this is the dirtiest one of the fleet. We've got some cleaner ones than this. Actually, just before we go up the stairs, we've got this incessant kind of ding, 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 ding noise, which is the fan of the engine. Do they really sound like this?
They sound like that, and in a heavy wind, they are very loud. And you'll actually hear passengers saying, is the engine okay? They come in the flight deck and go, is it fine?
Is it
but
okay?
It is fine.
Is it fine?
Yeah.
So what is this noise? What's actually going on here?
So what causes it are the blades of the engine are actually set so they're a little bit loose. Now, the reason for that is when the engine starts up, they get spun out and locked into position. So when they're sort of sitting here on the ground with the wind spinning, they kind of go tick, 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 because they're kind of dropping in and out of their little notch.
Okay. So there's a little bit of play, almost.
Exactly.
A little bit of room around the outside.
That's right, yeah.
And then when the big fan spins up,
exactly,
they almost like lock into place.
That's it, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah. So the stronger the wind, the noisier they get.
They can be so loud.
Okay.
Yeah, they really can be.
All right, so we go up the stairs.
We can see that there's a little window that's got the word danger underneath it and a big arrow. So that's obviously something to look at. So the first thing that we do is we look in this little window, and it's a little white plastic lens. Now what we're looking for is making sure that the red light's not flashing. The reason for that is if it is flashing, then the plane is pressurized. You could think of it like this: if the engineers over the night had done a pressurization test and they just forgot and left it could be pressurized.
Okay.
So that's why they make sure that this check is in place. So you have a little look in the window, you go, okay, there's no red light. And that's the first, and I guess it's the only sort of safety thing to do. What then we need to make sure is that the little barriers, as we've got on the left and the right side of here, are put back so we can open the door, which they are with GSX, which is good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a little barrier that kind of comes up to the airplane to stop people falling off the side of the stairs.
Yeah, exactly.
That has to be retracted to open the door.
Exactly, yeah. Normally you just put your foot on it and slide it back, and it's on a little ratchet. So.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And then presumably then you put your hand in that little thing where it says push here.
Exactly, yeah.
So
and
that little thing.
You put your hand in there, and then you pull it up. So that unlocks the door, pulls it away, and then you swing with your arm, holding that handle out, and you hear it go click, and then you push the handle down. And the reason you hear it go click is it locks into a thing that we call the gust lock.
Okay.
Now that's for, in a windy day, obviously this door can be quite hard to open, and it needs to stay in position, so you don't want it,
blowing back
and trapping someone in,
bashing into people.
Yeah, exactly. So then once it's in the gust lock, it's sort of locked in position, and then you put the handle down just to keep it safe.
The gust lock is kind of model. You can kind of
you can kind of see it actually. It's definitely there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the gust lock is this little thing in the middle with the little. It's got like a little switch on the top.
That's the one. Yeah. It's just a little like white button that basically, when we come to doing the reverse of this, that's what you press first, and it's just that is the gust lock there, the release of it.
Okay. So that holds the door open.
Exactly.
Right then. So then we go on board. So this is the first flight of the day.
Yeah.
We're the first people on the airplane. Then I'm guessing that shortly after us, the cabin crew will start showing up and everyone else.
Yeah, normally they're just behind us. Sometimes they come with you, or sometimes they're just behind. But yeah, they'll join us shortly on the aircraft. Yeah.
All right. So let's jump into the flight deck and off we go. we're kind of standing up now. Can you actually stand up in an A320 flight deck?
Yeah, the best place to stand is at the top left corner where we are now. You can actually stand up in it, which is it's pretty impressive. You know, for a short haul airline, that's pretty good. You know.
Yeah. 737s.
I think you're a bit
more squashed.
Yeah, maybe a bit shorter. Maybe you can.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, so you stand in, and then are you going to sit down now and get things going, or would you just kind of lean over to do what we've got to do before we go back outside?
I normally sit down. The reason is because that's comfier, really.
Yeah,
that's the primary reason. Yeah.
Now, the first thing is that we need to adjust the seat, because if there was some short ass sitting there before us, then we're going to need to move the seat out. The seats in the A320 are electric, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Now, do they work without? Because we don't have any power at the moment. The aircraft's completely dead. They don't. They're not electric without the power.
No, that's right. Yeah, they call it a manual override,
Okay.
which is basically just a fancy word for a lever.
A lever.
Yeah. So it just basically works the same way as a 7.3 would. So you pull it and you can move the chair. You can move it up, down, back, forth, in all the different directions.
Okay, so we can see. We look on the on the side of the seat. Then there's a bunch of levers on the bottom.
Yeah.
And then there's like these two little white switches. The two white switches, is that the electric?
That's
switches?
the electric one. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And they're super easy to use. You know, you push them and you can actually hear the motor and it goes zzz, zzz, and you go up and down and you can get finite control over it, which is really good.
So it makes a different. It won't make that zzz, zzz noise if we move it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the noise that they make when you haven't got the motors, because you're kind of just sliding it on a rail.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once we power up the aeroplane and we move it, it makes a different noise.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
It's
just
cool,
like
isn't
the
it?
real thing.
Yeah.
The ones at the bottom, there's an R, H, and A. So is it recline, height, and
Like a forward, backward,
adjust
or
something?
Yeah. That's exactly what it does. You've got lumbar support there as well, which is quite nice. And that's it really. It's fairly straightforward. The recline function isn't electric, so you will always use that recline one, even if you have power on the aircraft.
Are they quite comfortable, the A320 seats?
Yeah, I only ever use them, but lots of captains who've flown lots of different types say that they're actually pretty comfortable. You know, and they seem to be for longer flights. It's a comfortable place to sit.
They must get worn in places, right?
Yeah, they do. They get worn. Generally, this is sort of like a block of foam. That's what it is that you're sitting on. It just sort of looks like your bog standard foam, and they get worn down normally where you sit. So you end up sort of sitting up in your seat quite a bit.
Okay, so you almost get like a kind of bum kind
exactly.
of imprint.
Yeah, that's what you get.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, the first thing, of course, that you'll notice is that you've got an armrest on this side, and then you have this weird, like, big kind of deformed, Quasimodo type thing going on the other side. And we're going to talk about this because actually that armrest in the Airbus is incredibly important.
Very important.
Okay, all right. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to come back to that in a minute when we do our flight deck tour. So let's jump in the seat. So we're in the seat, and now we've got to start pushing some buttons. So what's the plan? Is there an initial kind of safety check and everything, and then we go and do the walk around? Because obviously in the real world, I'm guessing one pilot is up here getting everything ready while the other guy does the walk around. In the sim, we need to do both of those roles.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the best thing to do for the sim is you kind of get the aircraft powered up to a basic state, and then we go and do the walk around.
Okay.
And that's basically you're just checking that everything is left in the right position for you to power up the aircraft. So that's what we start with.
Okay. All right. So let's do that now.
Yeah, so we'll start first of all by the engine master switches.
Okay.
So we start down here. So first of all, we check that the parking brake is on, which it is.
It is.
It's on the position. Then we check that both the engine masters are off.
Okay.
Which I can see that they are, which is good. And then we check that the engine mode selector is normal. So these are all little things that, if you've had someone who's been doing engineering work on it, they might have just left them in that position, which is obviously not ideal. We check that the thrust levers are idle, which they are, which is great. And then we move on to the overhead panel. Once we're on the overhead panel, we have a look at the wipers and we check that they're both off. Now, the reason that we check they're both off now is because when we power up the aircraft with the batteries, if they were left in any other position than that, they're going to start wiping, which in a rainy day wouldn't be so bad. But like a beautiful sunny day today,
it will scratch the windscreen.
It will scratch the windscreen, yeah.
And an A320 windscreen is more than it costs for a car, I imagine.
I would imagine.
It's the price of a car.
I would imagine it's more.
Yeah,
I know that some of the components are insane. Like the chair that we were just looking at, it's $250,000.
$250,000 pounds? Dollars?
That was dollars.
Dollars.
Yeah.
$250,000
for a chair,
for a pilot seat.
Yeah.
Wow.
It has motors, but that's still not great.
At least it's electric.
So I imagine the window is expensive.
Yeah, okay. So we don't want to scratch the window.
Exactly. So we have a look at that they're both off, which they are. That's great. And then we move up to the batteries.
Now, this is, I guess, a point of some confusion for people because it's saying it's off and it's not off and it's all a bit confusing. But
yeah, it's people's very first introduction to the Airbus. Normally, they sort of sit in this seat and give it a go, and they go, "What?
Why is it saying off?
Why is it saying off when it's not off and it's on?" And anyway, so the basic premise of this is, at the moment, the aircraft, as we know, is completely cold dark. We've got no power onto it. The only thing that you'll be able to see are the voltages, which we can see. So they're an accurate representation of the battery voltage.
Now, these will always be on.
Always.
Always.
Yeah.
So the only time you ever might see these dead is if the aircraft is in storage in the desert and the batteries are taken out. And,
something like that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what this looks like. You don't know because you've never seen it.
No.
But always, you will see these things on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first thing that we do is I'll explain what we'll do before we press the button because it is a bit weird. You turn on battery number 1.
Okay.
Now, when we turn on battery number 1, the light for battery number 2 comes on.
Okay.
Now, this sounds weird, but it does make sense. So, because you've turned the battery on, it's no longer off, obviously.
Of course, so it won't say off.
So it won't say off. Whereas the other one is off.
Okay. No, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So battery. So they're both off.
Yeah.
But because there's no power, they can't tell us they're off.
Yeah, that's it.
So we will add some power to the aircraft with battery number 1.
Yeah.
And that will now no longer be off. But battery number 2, which is also now off, will now have power to tell us
exactly.
it's off.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So it just feels very odd that you press a button and then a light comes on the other button.
Yeah, okay. So this is the first Airbus gotcha.
This is the first Airbus what's going on moment. Like, yeah.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So should we do this then? Yeah. So we'll go battery number. Does it matter which way you do
Not
them?
necessarily. You can do it in any order, but I just always start with 1.
Okay, so we go battery number 1. All right, and then we get a click.
Yeah.
The voltage goes down, and you can see battery number 2 is now saying it's off.
Exactly.
So battery 1 is on. Battery 2 now has power to tell us it's off.
That's it.
All right, cool.
A bit weird, but yeah.
It is a little bit weird. Right, so now we can go for 2.
Exactly.
All right, and we get a little click, and now the aircraft is powered. So are we going to now see a few flashes and self-tests and other bits and pieces?
Yeah, you can see that there's a few lights that have come on, and we can hear a few little noises in the background, but not too much. And that's because the batteries only supply DC power. Okay. So obviously we have the 2 different types of power. There's DC and AC, but the batteries only do that one type. So the systems that are on at the moment are the ones that run off that power supply.
Now, we can see that the voltages are going down. So it's gone from 28 point something down to 27.2, and it seems to be kind of going down. This is not the actual voltage of the battery, right?
No.
It can only measure the batteries when the batteries are switched off.
Yeah, that's correct.
What's that about?
I think it's because when the batteries are under load, they don't quite display the right voltage. I think that's fairly consistent with other electrical systems, but it's one of those ones where you're just like, that's a bit weird.
Because it does look, it's going down.
Yeah, it's going down
scarily
now.
fast.
So if we turn them off again
All right, so I'm going to turn 2 off.
Yeah.
And it goes back to 28.
Yeah, and you can turn both of them off. And so the actual voltage is 28.3 and 28.0.
So we can see that just in doing that, we've actually run the right number 2 battery. Well, actually, both of them, we've run them down a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if we kept doing this, turning it on and off and turning because presumably now we can get lights on and things like this, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Then we would run the batteries down.
You would, and you'd run into a problem, especially if you're on sort of a very remote airfield, because you use the batteries to start the auxiliary power unit in the tail.
Okay.
But where we have now, we have external power, so that's okay. But it can become more of a little bit of an embarrassment where you have to call someone and go, I've run the plane flat. Can you bring some more batteries?
So we need a jump. Does somebody bring a van and we connect it up?
I'm not.
We don't even want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a big van.
So a big van. Now, but there is, as I understand it from my very scant Airbus knowledge, you can, if we have external power, we can use that to recharge the batteries.
Yeah. So what we should do is when we look at these batteries, you want to check if they're above 25.5. That's the voltage we want to be above. Yeah.
Okay.
So if the aircraft is sat for more than 6 hours.
Which we guess
it has. Most of the time, when you get in the morning, you just assume, they must have. Then they need to be above that. Now, the reason for that is that gives us enough voltage to start the auxiliary power unit with the batteries alone.
Okay.
If they're not, then we have to charge them. And it's pretty easy to charge.
Okay.
You basically, as you were saying, you've got the external power there. You leave them in the on position as they were, and then you just turn the external on, and it will charge the batteries up.
Okay, so effectively, that the batteries will recharge from the external power.
Exactly, yeah, that's it.
Okay, so it's a bit like plugging in your iPhone, really.
Yeah.
So the external power is a bit like
it's like an
phone.
external power. It's an external charger, like almost for the batteries, and it's very, very uncommon to find them that low. But still, it can happen.
It does work, and it is modelled. And maybe at some point later in the program, we'll actually come to an aircraft that has the batteries depleted, and we'll need to charge them up.
Yeah.
But we're good to go today.
We're good to go.
So let's go battery number 1 on.
And the other one's off.
And the other one's off. So we need to turn that one back on, and everything's good. And we can now we could either start the APU.
Exactly, yeah.
Or we can use the external power.
That's right, yeah.
But Eurojet's all about saving money.
Exactly.
Because the owner has a helicopter to fund. So we're going to hit the external power, and now
it's coming to life.
It comes to life. Behold the machine. All right. So we get fans and things like that. What are the fans that we're hearing now?
So what the fans we're hearing now, they're called the avionics ventilation fans.
Okay.
Now, they are what produce most of the noise in the flight deck. And you can kind of really hear it. There's quite a lot of background sort of whirring, whooshing, and this is all the cooling that's coming from the avionics coming in and out.
It's noisy, huh?
It is noisy, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's you don't notice it so much when you've had a very long day, but when you turn the aircraft off, you go, oh, it's just so quiet.
Peace.
Yeah.
All right. Now, we noticed that the screens have kind of appeared, but they're very dim. So what's the story there?
Yeah, this comes back from an earlier thing with the Airbus, but they still do it now because it makes sense. I'll just wait for that to finish. It's a little thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it comes back from an earlier thing where basically the screens are very expensive, as everything is in the Airbus and every other aircraft. So when you leave the aircraft, you normally turn the brightness down to the minimum. And the reason is it's not basically wasting the screen, because the backlight can cause a little bit of wear on the screens.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So actually, you don't turn them off.
No.
You just, at the end of the day, turn them to the dimmest setting.
Exactly.
And then when we power up the aircraft, we put them into to bright. Okay. So let's do that now. So let me just move back to the captain's seat, and then where would you normally turn these in the real aircraft?
Yeah, so that's I normally grab it round roughly actually where you've got that.
About 12.
Yeah, about 12.
Maybe a bit more. Yeah.
It's dependent on really what you like. Some people have them really bright. Some people have that. If you're doing a night flight, it depends. But yeah, around about the 12 o'clock position where you've got it.
Okay. Now there are two settings. We've got the MFD, which is the multi-function display.
I think in Airbus
multi-flying display.
In Airbus parlance, they call it a PFD and an ND.
Oh
That's
my god!
They've got.
All right, okay.
So they like to make things a bit complicated.
Right. Okay. My god. Okay.
Yeah.
So the PFD is the left-hand side one,
exactly.
and then the right-hand side one. Why does the ND, the navigation display, this has two settings? So what's the different ones?
Now this is a definite one of those ones that it's an Airbus gotcha again, definitely.
Okay.
And it's a big one. And the outside knob is for the weather radar.
Okay.
So because the weather radar is going to display on the navigation display, that controls the brightness for that. But as you can see, when you move it now, we're not getting any change because the weather radar isn't on.
Of course. So if you leave that to off, there's no weather radar.
There's no weather radar, and there is no warning associated with that at all.
So you press the weather button, or you turn the weather radar on, which is down here somewhere, and then you go, oh, great, there's no weather, we're all good.
Yep.
But it's just not displaying it.
And there's been multiple incidents where people have taken off, gone into very bad weather, and realised it was because they had the brightness all the way down.
Wow. Okay. So there's your first Airbus gotcha. Don't leave the weather radar switched, or don't leave the display for the weather radar switched off.
Because that's the big threat is, normally if you left the weather radar off, you would get a little warning, and you'd kind of maybe trigger and go, oh, yeah, I've left it off. Whereas that, you get no warning, nothing. It seems fully functional when it isn't.
Okay. All right. So let's do the other screens then. So let's turn on. So we've got the ECAM that we discussed before.
Exactly.
So again, I'm just going to turn that around.
Yeah, it's around there, yeah.
Around the 12 o'clock. Now, these screens, if you turn them off, they do swap themselves around, right?
Yeah, they do a weird thing where basically the top screen, it's called there's the upper and the lower ECAM.
Okay,
but on the upper ECAM, we also have a little thing called the EWD. Now that's called the engine warning display, which is like the engines and stuff, and that's obviously more important than seeing the door page.
Yeah.
So that's why the top screen always has priority. So that the information that you see on that top screen has the priority.
Okay. All right. So if I turn off the top one, then it jumps onto the bottom screen.
Exactly, yeah. Because it has priority over it, then it's going to jump down to the screen that it can get to.
Now, another quick question while we're on it. We noticed the eagle-eyed viewers will notice that the engine display, the left-hand side one, has now gone to some little X's, whereas the right side engine, we're still seeing the numbers. We're still seeing 0.6 and 24 and all that. What do these little X's mean, and why do we sometimes see them? Why weren't they there when we started, and then kind of now they've disappeared and reappeared? We'll see these kind of appear and disappear. Yeah,
that's right. You see it quite a bit. And what it is they are as we can see, they show you the information with the engine. Now, the engine has a little computer in it called the FADEC, which is pretty much what interfaces with the engine itself. And if the FADEC is powered down, you don't see anything. You see the little amber crosses.
So the amber crosses mean that the FADEC has effectively gone to sleep.
Yeah, it's in sleep mode. You've locked your iPhone, you've locked your FADEC. Okay. It's in sleep mode. It's there still, but it's not broken. It's just off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we start the engines, or if it wants to run a little self-test or whatever, there might be certain conditions where it will appear. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And when you'll notice when you move the engine mode selector.
So let's just again, I know we're getting off the point a little bit, but it's just a good demo. So if I go to ignition start,
and here they come back.
So there we go. And then if I turn that back to normal, there you go. Then it's gone back to sleep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite cool.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. We got off the point a little bit, but that was a nice little thing to know. Let me just sort out the.
Yeah, it's just exactly the same as the other side. Yeah.
And again, we want to make sure that we turn up the navigation display, both the knobs, otherwise we won't have any weather radar. So there we go. All right. So we've got screens on both sides now. We don't have any displays. We don't have any altitude. We don't have any speeds. We don't have a map. We don't have anything. And presumably this is because we haven't initialized any of our navigation capability right now.
That's it. It doesn't know where it is. It doesn't know where it wants to go to. So it just sits there and says, not available. What do you want?
What do you want to do? Okay. So at this stage in the game, because obviously we're not doing anything inside yet, we're going to go and step outside. We can just leave this and everything's fine.
Yeah, if you want to do the walk around, the only switch that we need to do from over the top of here before we do the walk around is we need to make sure that the nav and the logo lights are selected on, so you can see them when you do the walk around.
Okay, so the nav and the logo lights, the nav lights are those little lights on the wingtips. There's a red one and the green one.
That's correct, yeah.
And if you remember back to our 777 cadet training program, there ain't no red port left. So
I like that.
You drink port.
Oh, I like that.
There's no red port left. The red is on the port and the green one is on the start.
Oh, I like that.
That's good,
That's good. Yeah,
I feel like I'm teaching you something now,
good,
James.
That's good, yeah.
An Airbus logo light, is it on all the time?
No, I've not really seen it written down anywhere, but I believe it's when the flaps are out, then it comes on. I believe that's what it comes from, yeah.
Okay, right. So on the ground, it's on all the time.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you retract the flaps on the takeoff, it goes off.
I believe so. I believe that's how it works.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. It's interesting they don't always write all these things down for you.
No, and the thing is different.
Do they think you don't need to know this?
I think that's one of those things where they just go, they don't need to know that. I'm sure somewhere, if you looked hard enough, you could find an answer. But also, the issue that you've got is so many different customers have different slight variations. And someone says, no, it does this. And you go, no, it does that. And then you end up
There might be someone that has it wired up all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just end up going, you know what? It does its thing.
Yeah, okay. I got you. And I guess the logo light is not. It doesn't matter if the logo isn't lit up. It's not a safety item.
It's not safety, so you can just leave it. Even if the bulbs are gone,
So we've got two positions. We've got off and then 1 and 2.
That's correct.
And are they using different? Why do you actually have two different settings on this?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good question, and they have two different wiring sort of connections to it and two different bulbs. So it's two completely independent systems. Now, the reason for that is if you want to fly at night, you actually can't depart without them.
Oh.
So that's why, and I've had it once or twice, where you do the walk around, you go, Captain, the right-hand light's out. Oh, system 2, have a look out the window, works, let's go.
Okay. So it would be a bit embarrassing to cancel the flight because the light bulb's gone.
Yeah, and the issue you have is it's not that quick of a fix. Guy's got to come out with a ladder, get up there, take the cover off, take the bulb off. It's
Yeah, big delay.
It's a big delay for something that's just a bit silly, you
Yeah.
know. But it's a legal requirement, so that's why they have the two systems.
Okay, and how do you guys use it? We know what it is. How do you use it? Do you use it in one or two? Alternate? Did airlines do different things?
Different airlines do different things. Some of them do it like one sector they do one sector they do two. But there's nothing that says you can't just leave it on a certain setting and be done with it.
All right. So Eurojet, the policy is we use two.
Yeah, and with two, we just leave it in two.
Yeah. All right. Cool. There we go. So that's it. We don't need to do anything else out here now. We can now jump out and go and do the walk around.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So at this point, we've got a lovely day outside. We don't actually have a temperature. I was just thinking, it's a beautiful day here in Menorca. Let's have a look at the temperature. And we don't actually have any.
Yeah.
Is it because the aircraft can't sense the temperature until we've set some more things up?
We haven't aligned anything yet. The air data reference units, which is sort of to do with sensors, all this sort of stuff, aren't functional at the moment as well. So it kind of just goes, I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
so this is actually one thing where in a Boeing you can see it all the time.
Yeah.
In your little Cessna, you have a little thermometer,
right.
almost like a little turkey
exactly.
probe thing.
Yeah.
And you can see it all the time. But in Airbus, until we've got some more stuff set up,
you don't know.
We don't know what the temperature is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's about 27 degrees
27,
Celsius
that's a nice
outside,
day.
which
That's
is
a nice
I think
day.
in the 80s Fahrenheit, which is very nice.
That's good.
So we don't need a big jacket for the walk around
No,
today.
definitely not.
All right, so let's head outside. All right, so here we are outside, basking in the Menorcan sunshine, and we're going to start our walk around. So what do we do next?
So we start the walk around, and we always start it at the same point, so you sort of get a good reference point. So the first thing that we're looking at here is we've got these, you can see the sort of grey circles with a red circle around the outside. That's what we're first looking at there.
And what are these?
Yeah, what they are is they're the angle of attack vanes, a system the Airbus relies on very, very heavily, and it's relied on it from the very first time it was put into production. So that's why we have three on this aircraft for redundancy. And they're also a bit spread apart. That's why they're not right next to each other, just to make sure. But it's a very, very important check. Like if someone's kind of dropped the stairs a bit low, then dragged it up, it could break it, and you've really got to be sure that these are in good condition.
Okay, all right. So we have a look. So we check out the angle of attack sensors. Then having a look down, we then come across the static ports.
Yeah.
What system do these drive?
So they're driving like the altimeter and also the airspeed indications, all the sort of instruments that rely on airflow to go through them.
It says don't plug, deform, so this needs to be clean, not damaged.
Exactly.
This is important.
It needs to be, they have the big red box around the small sort of the red area in the middle. The reason for that is if there's any damage inside that area, then it's still classified as a no-go. So you're really looking for anything in that area, and as it says, nothing can be deformed. You've got to make sure it's clean, good condition.
Okay, all right. Moving on, we get this air inlet valve.
Yeah.
So is air being sucked in? We can kind of hear it. It's quite noisy.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Air being sucked into here.
That's what it is. It's air's being sucked in here and then blown through underneath the aircraft, which is where we have all the avionics, and comes out the other side.
So the avionics, this is it's like a big bay.
Yeah.
It's full of lots of computers and all the kind of electronics that drive the airplane.
Yeah.
And presumably that all gets super hot. Think about how hot your computer gets.
Yeah, it gets really hot.
Yeah.
And it needs a lot of cooling. And you got to think about it with the Airbus as well. It's from the 80s. So it's like, imagine having 5 or 6 Pac-Man machines underneath you.
Yeah.
It's like,
Okay,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the sort of sophistication that you've got. So it's a lot of heat that gets drawn there. It's not a very modern microprocessor. It's lots of big boards that need a lot of cooling. So that's why this is here.
Okay. And this is going to be open on the ground. Are there going to be times when you might see this closed?
Yeah, there's various things that trigger it to close, but one of the main ones, and you might see it in the sim, is if the air temperature goes below 12 degrees Celsius,
Okay.
then it will close.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason behind that is you just simply don't need the air sucked through because it's cold enough on the outside to keep the avionics cool on the inside.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's quite clever. It knows the kind of ambient temperature.
Yeah.
And it goes, actually, you know what? I don't need. But on a day like today,
It needs
27 degrees
Yeah,
outside,
yeah.
hot day,
Yeah.
hot electronics, and it needs the cooling.
Yeah, it definitely needs it.
Right. Okay. Can we turn this off from inside?
Yeah, there's a button on the overhead, and it's called the ventilation panel, and you can
Okay.
turn it off manually yourself. When you've got the blower push button on the ventilation panel, you take it from being in automatic, you
Yeah.
press it, and it goes to override. So you're
Okay.
overriding the automatic function.
And then you can actually hear.
That's that sort of valve closing. It goes.
The
It's
sound
nearly
changes.
closed. Yeah.
And then if we have a look outside, it's closed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay. But I'm guessing on a day like today, it's probably not a great idea to leave it closed for too long.
No, it's not a great idea, especially in the condition that we're in now, because also you can use air-conditioned air to cool the avionics bay, but we don't have that running.
Yeah.
So
okay.
the only thing cooling this is sort of it's just itself inside there, so it could just cook.
Yeah,
which is not great.
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
I mean it's a hot day. The aircraft's
Yeah.
just sitting here. All right, so there you go. So that's now reopened again. And
Yeah, exactly.
The avionics are cooling and they're happy.
Yeah.
We've got some things under the aeroplane. I mean, we're not going to talk about every single detail, but let's just kind of look at the big ones. A kind of little mast here.
Yeah, they're all to do with sort of drainage from various things inside the aircraft that can dump on the apron, so it's nothing toxic. It's just
so
normally,
we're not going to be dumping stuff from the loo or the
no,
toilet.
nothing that bad. That all goes into a separate system it's taken out when you're on the ground, and that's what one of the people do. They open up a big tube and take it all out, which is pleasant.
That doesn't sound like a nice job.
No.
But I'm guessing that stuff from the sinks and things like that, which is, I guess, the cleaner water,
Yeah.
that can get vented overboard.
Yeah, that's all right to go overboard, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cargo door selector,
Yeah.
potable drain water panel.
So that's to do with the sort of water that's coming out of the sinks and everything. So that's why it's near there, yeah.
Okay,
So
all right.
all we're really looking for when you do the walk around is just to see if these are in good condition and they're not damaged and they're closed, if they should be closed. Because they could be open, like the cargo door selector could be open, that's fine, because they're using the cargo doors. Obviously not right now, but that's what we're looking for. And we've got this sort of white aerial here, it's called a multi-mode receiver, it's to do with the ILS. And then these little orange ones here are DME, so they're to do with the measuring of the distance with the navigation equipment.
Okay, so again, you just want to make sure these are not damaged and all the rest of it.
Yeah. I know a guy did a walk around, hit his head on them and broke one off. So I don't quite know how hard he hit his head, but
he's got a stronger head than mine.
Yeah, he broke an Airbus with his head.
Yeah, all right.
So yeah.
Okay, now, so we come around to the forward landing gear.
Yeah.
And it talks about opening, door ground opening. Is this opening the forward kind of gear doors that close themselves when the gear's extended?
That's what it's for. It's mainly for, there are a few things in there that engineering and maintenance need to get to. So if they need to open it, it's basically warning you how it opens and don't close it if someone's in there. Because you normally stand on a little ladder and you half in and half out of the bay. So closing those doors would be a very bad idea. So that's what this warning's for.
Okay, all right. So you've got to be really careful around open hatches and things like that.
Yeah, this is why generally the rule that I use anyways is either fully open or fully closed. It's not in between or you don't know what's happening. It's either open or closed and you know which ones are open.
So we come around to the nose and we've got a few little hatches here.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, are these to kind of get into the avionics we talked about under the flight deck? These are to access different things.
Yeah, that's what it's for. The forward one there gets you into the avionics bay, and that's one of the main access points for the avionics bay, actually. And the door further back to the right, if you can see, there's a little circle that's green, and it says oxygen discharge. Now, what that's for is the bottle behind there is the oxygen bottle that we use in the flight deck, and that occasionally needs to be replaced. So that's why that door's there, just to be able to get to that.
Does the oxygen discharge over time? Or is it like time limited, or it has to be replenished? So even if you're not using it?
I think there's probably a time limit on it, but there's also, it just depletes itself because it's not going to have a perfect seal. And every time that we come to later on, every time we do the oxygen test, a bit is squirted out. If it's red, that means it's been used.
It's been
depleted.
which is like, and that's very
bad.
Very bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. We've got a few more aerials and things sticking out here. What do we got?
So these are called pitot tubes, and they go along with the static port that we were looking for before. And what they basically measure is the amount of air going over the aeroplane. And the ones that we can see on the other side, there's two of them there, and there's one on my side here. And this is the one that broke off.
So your side was the one that broke off.
So the bird bounced off the nose, hit this, and then bent it back at an angle. And then it continued to hit, and it went all the way and hit the slat.
Oh, really?
So that's where it continued to go. And that's actually fairly common, that it'll bounce off the front and hit the slat, because you can sort of see it's roughly in the right direction.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, though, how unlucky it is to hit that probe. Because if you look at the surface area that we've got there, it's tiny. You know, it's not the biggest probe.
That bird was having a worse day than you.
It did have a much worse day than me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So basically, again, around here, you just want to make sure that these are closed and everything else. Now, we've got a little thing under here, the ground electric connection interphone service.
Yeah.
What's this?
Catchy name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What it is this panel's normally open on the turnaround.
Okay.
And the ground power unit gets inserted in there. And that's why it says ground electric connection. But also, when the pushback truck wants to talk to you, they plug their headset into that little panel as well, so they can talk to you and you can hear them. That's what goes in that little panel.
So the moment it's closed, but if they modelled, they don't actually model the GPU.
No, but if they did,
we don't have that in the Flight Sim Labs. Yeah. But if we did see the cable, this is where it would be plugged in.
That's where it'd be plugged. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And there's one connection in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's have a look at the nose gear, because I guess there's quite a bit to talk about here. First thing I want to ask you is, we've got a bunch of lights. Now, what do all these lights actually do? We've got the big one there, the top right-hand side. What's that one?
There's an easy way to remember what these lights do. Because I remember initially thinking, there's a lot of lights there. How am I going to remember, exactly what they do? But the best one is the one you mentioned, the big one. That's the takeoff light. Okay. And I always think of takeoff is the most important thing, so you get the biggest light. Okay. Yeah, the one next to it, that's the taxi light. And I always think, well, taxi is not quite as important as takeoff, so it's a bit smaller. So that's the taxi light.
All right.
And we've got the two that are sort of pointing at an angle, and they're the runway turn-off lights. And I think, well, if I want to turn off a runway, I'd want them at an angle. So that's what it is. And they're the lights.
So we know what it is. Let's ask how do we use it? I know obviously airlines use it in different ways. What's the Eurojet SOP?
So with Eurojet, what we do is when we want a taxi, we put the taxi light on. So even in daylight, just so it's people know that we're taxiing. And once we come to a stop, normally, if your parking brake is set and you sort of stop for a while, you'll turn the taxi light off.
And then onto the runway, and presumably at that point, then we go to the takeoff light.
That's correct. And then you put the light in takeoff, and that just gives you a bit more light for the runway. It's a bit brighter, and it's a bit bright so you can see more, but you might say, well, why don't you use a takeoff light for taxiing? But it's a bit too bright.
It's a bit too bright.
It's a bit too bright, yeah.
Okay, all right. And then the runway turn-off lights, again, on the runway.
Yeah.
But you don't really need them for taxiing.
No, you don't really need them for taxiing.
Do you actually find them a bit too bright? Is it sometimes a bit easier to actually look at the lighting on the taxiway itself?
Yeah, that's exactly it, because they illuminate at an angle. They can kind of wash out the taxi light edge lights. So you think, oh, hang on, what's going on? I'd rather it be a bit darker and be able to see the edge of the lights.
Okay, all right. So they can actually give you a bit too much light.
Yeah, they can do. Yeah.
And you'd actually rather it be darker at the edge.
Yeah.
And you can see the blue lights of the taxiway.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is there anything else here that we need to have a look at? Condition of the tyres, that kind of thing must be important.
Just general condition. Just look at the tyres, look at the wheel, see if the rim is okay. And also we generally have a little quick look at the steering damper. And we basically just check that that's in good condition if it's there. Generally, the whole walk-around is done quite quickly. You're just sort of looking and, yeah, that looks normal. Yeah, that looks normal. And that's what we're doing. Now,
one interesting thing is this front wheel is nice and shiny and silver. But if you look at the rear wheel on the main gear, it's black. Now, my understanding is I don't think Eurojet paint them black.
No.
Why is it black and the front one's silver?
That's a good question. And the reason is, on the front, we don't have any brakes. No brakes on the front at all. That's where the wheel's quite small, and you can kind of see in between. There's no brakes there. Whereas on the rear, so the main landing gear brakes, we actually have carbon brakes. So over time, this is very, very standard for the brakes. Just the wheels, in fact, to be completely black from just excess carbon.
From the dust.
Yeah, from the dust and everything. It's just they get coated in it.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So we move around.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here is, again, it's a replication of the other static port on the other side, so it's just a backup. So because it's an important system, as you know with aircraft, if you can have as many systems, you have as many as you can get away with. So they've got a backup of it here. And above the cargo door, which is often quite hard to see during the walk-around because the door's normally open, you have the third angle of attack sensor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a little light just above the Airbus logo.
Oh, yeah.
There is a little light, and is that a light to flash back onto the wing?
That's what it is. It's the wing light. So it does what it says on the tin. It illuminates the wing so we can see it.
Obviously here, the cargo door, right now, we don't have any baggage or anything, so the door is closed. It's hydraulically operated, so does this mean that you can't open it if the aircraft's not powered, you can't open the door?
You can do it manually. They have a little crank handle that they basically...
So like an old-fashioned car where you...
that's it. Yeah, and it just slowly does the hydraulic system. So it still uses the hydraulics to open it, but you manually are pressurizing the hydraulic system. I bet the ground crew
are not very keen on doing that.
They love that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, but I guess most of the time, it's very rare for them to have to do that.
Yeah, very rare. Like, if they're loading bags, then we're normally in there, so...
Okay, yeah. All right. We'll have a look. This door is actually connected in its own sweet way to the hydraulic system.
It is, but I guess we'll come back to that.
Which is a really cool thing that the Airbus actually the door affects the hydraulic system. It's really cool. We're going to talk about that.
Only on an Airbus.
Yeah, only on an Airbus. All right, so we're going to talk about that. As we move away from the cargo door, we hear the kind of sound gets a lot quieter.
Yeah.
You know that. So we had the intake for the avionics on one side. Is this an outflow or another inflow on this side?
That's an outflow, so that's the outlet for it. So it's getting sucked in on the left side and blown out on the right side. And actually, it's very noticeable. Like it feels like the strongest hairdryer you've ever known.
Really?
That's what it's like.
Really powerful.
It's really quite powerful. It's quite warm as well. That's why it has the caution high hot air flow. So it's kind of warning you. And the first time you do a walk around, you walk into it, oh, okay, I won't do that again.
So do you get, on a cold day, do you get, the ground guys kind of standing under this to warm up a bit?
Yeah, they huddle under it.
They huddle under it on a really cold day.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing I have seen is people's very sad faces because when it goes below that 12 degrees, it closes.
Oh, of course.
So then you see
they don't need it. Yeah, of course. So actually on a very cold day, it might not even be open.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, so
that's
a real shame.
Poor guys.
Yeah.
So we're now kind of below the belly of the aircraft.
Yeah, that's right.
And all of these things, there's lots of hatches here, presumably lots of things that can open up so the engineers can get into things.
Yeah, a lot of the hydraulics and the air conditioning systems are located in this area of the aircraft. So there's a lot of service panels. So there's like topping up the hydraulic systems and getting into the air conditioning system is here. That's why there's so many little panels. But what we're looking for is just to be closed, really. Okay. There's no reason why these panels should be open at this point.
All right. Now, we've got these two things, kind of inlet swings inward. Now, where does the air go? This looks like there's going to be air which kind of goes into there.
Yeah.
What's this air used for?
So this air, and it's kind of a little bit odd because it's offset. So you can see that this is an inlet for the air conditioning system.
Okay.
Now, the outlet is offset. So you can see the inlet is here, and then the outlet is on the other side. So it doesn't quite line up. It's a bit strange.
Somebody in Toulouse knows why it's like this.
I'm sure there's a very good reason.
But we don't know.
Yeah.
Right, okay, cool. So that's the air conditioning system. Then obviously you got the beacon, that's the red light down there. Yeah. And then the magnetic fuel level, what's that?
It's just, there's a lot of these sensors that go around the wing, and also this is for the center tank. So you can look and see what the fuel level is without using the computer on board. But you're not going to look for them on the walk around. It's an engineer thing.
It's
really.
an engineer thing.
Yeah,
so this is if there's a malfunction with the fuel sensors or whatever. This is a way of them actually physically checking the level.
That's what it is. And if you think about it, it's useful to have. But if we're in the flight and we lose the fuel quantity indication, well, we're not going to get out and have a look.
Yeah, you're not really going to crawl. You're not really going to crawl around here and do it.
And one thing to note is if you're standing here during the walk around with the packs on, they are incredibly loud. Unbelievably loud. They're almost as loud as the jet engine. They are unbelievable. So that's why you have to be very careful.
So at the moment we don't have any packs on.
No.
But there's already, the only thing that's on right now is the avionics blowing.
Yeah.
And it's noisy enough. So there might be the APU running.
Yes.
And the packs on.
Mm-hmm.
So damn, it's going to be noisy down here.
It is noisy. That's why you've got to be careful and take ear protection.
So we've got a couple more vents, I guess, to do with the air conditioning and the packs and everything else. Another drain vent. Is this another one like the one further up?
Yeah, I think it's the same sort of thing. It's water that's allowed to come out of the aircraft and can go on the ground, and it's nothing bad, but they can be quite hot, so that's why they have a warning on some of them that says warning hot.
You don't want to touch them.
You don't want to touch it. You just sort of let it do its thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is quite a dirty aircraft, but we can see the streaks on it, and there's all kinds of crud underneath it.
That's very typical. This is what your normal line aircraft will look like, because you've got to think about it. To clean an aircraft is quite an extensive process, and they're just not going to pay for it to do that while it's doing its busy duties. Once it's on the ground at night, it's being worked on by the engineers. They don't have time to clean it. So it will get cleaned, but not as frequently as your car. Let's put it that way.
How often does I know it obviously varies with airline to airline. How often is the average aircraft given a wash?
I would say it's quite a few months.
Really?
Minimum,
so it's probably a few times a year.
Yeah, something like that. So once we've come from underneath the aircraft, you kind of go back out to have a look at the wing, and we're looking at the condition of the slats and the whole wing itself, because things can impact it. The slats are quite vulnerable. Birds can hit them, debris can hit them, and obviously because they're a moving object, you want to check that there's no dents, dings, anything like that. That's what we're looking for. And then once we've looked at that, we're going to move across to the engine.
Okay. Do aeroplanes get dented and dinged quite a lot?
Yeah, they do, and generally there's a limit to everything. And obviously, in the book, when you have a look in the morning, it says it's dented here, just like a rent car.
So when you get a rental car, you get a sheet and it has all the dings on it.
Yeah.
And an aeroplane has the
same
thing.
As it really does, and they're obviously all within the limits of to be safe. But it's useful to look at it because then if you do a walk around and you see a big dent, you think, oh no, that was in the book, so it's okay.
How does an aeroplane get dented generally? Is it usually ground handling stuff like cargo handling and stairs and things?
I think it's generally in the areas that they have most, like the ground handling stuff gets near it, someone just drives in a bit too hard, or it can also be from debris on the ground, like something gets flicked up, hits the slat or hits a bit of the wing, and yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we know that these aircraft work very hard.
Yeah, they do.
And once they've been flying around for like 10, 12 hours a day for 10, 12 years, they're going to be pretty bruised and battered.
That's what it is, yeah. And they do, and if it gets out of limits, they actually put a plaster. That's what they do.
Really?
It's a patch. Yeah.
Wow.
So you might see a big aluminium patch over the top of something that's dented bad enough, and that's to tie the surfaces back together.
Wow.
So you will see that, and that's perfectly safe.
Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about the engines, and I mean, it's pretty simple how a jet engine works. I think everyone knows, we've got a big fan of fuel and it gets mixed up.
Yeah.
That's kind of beyond the scope, really, of what we're doing here.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But, I mean, let's just talk through what we've got. Obviously, the cowling is the outside bit. The big fan, this is the N1 fan,
That's
right?
correct, yeah. So you got the big fan, and you can still hear that noise, because that's what we explained earlier. And really, all you're looking for when you're doing the walk around is you're just looking, is there any damage? There's the same thing in the book, which shows you little damages to the blades, because the blades get damaged from birds and debris that goes into the engine, and then normally shows you which one's which, so you have a look and go, yeah, that's fine. And you're just really looking at the general condition of the engine.
Okay, all right. So this one looks okay.
Looks perfect, yeah.
Inside, you can see that it's got like this kind of grey, almost looks like a matte thing.
Yeah.
And then it has this little kind of plastic kind of seal that goes around the outside. Now, what does this do?
So I believe that the plastic seal is sort of so they can bring the tolerances in tighter, because the tighter you can bring the engine to the edge of the blade, the less air that's going to slip past it rather than going through the blades.
Okay.
So it's basically making it more efficient. And the little grey, actually, when you run your hands over it, it's like so the best way to describe it is like a cheese grater, but not sharp. You can run your hand over it and it's quite smooth, but what it is from my understanding, is this is where some of the bleed air, which we'll talk about later, can come out and de-ice the engine. Because this is where a lot of the ice builds up. If you're going to get it on the engine, it'll be on the front.
Okay, so when we come back and talk about our icing flight, which we're going to do later on, we can talk a bit about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but really for the walk around, we just want to make sure this isn't dented, doesn't have problems, and
that's it. It's just a cursory glance, really.
Yeah, okay, cool. Is it called the pylon, isn't it, this bit where it joins
this
up?
Is the pylon, and its primary purpose is just to attach the engine to the airframe. It's very strong, very, very strong piece of the aircraft.
Okay, and again, you just want to check that looks all right, no big problems.
Yeah, you're just looking if there's any dents or cracks or anything like that. And this is all you're looking for, is they call it a general visual inspection.
Let's talk about the cowling itself.
Okay.
I'm guessing this is quite a big deal, especially these days.
It is. There's quite a few Airbus operators have had some very embarrassing incidents, and it's where there's the little cowling latches. So engineers, for whatever reason, they're going to open up the engine. So
this kind of white bit that we can see around the outside, this whole thing kind of opens up.
Imagine like wings. Yeah. Like it kind of opens
two
up
little
like
wings
that.
Opens up.
Two open up. And you open that up to get inside the engine to do service, maintenance, whatever. They open it up very regularly. I believe nearly every night they open it up to put some oil in, because they burn quite a bit of oil. So it's not abnormal for them to have them open, but you've got to make sure that they're closed. And they've had a few where they've taken off, they weren't properly closed. The wind gets caught underneath it, rips them off, and does some damage to the engine.
And that's a big problem.
Big problem. And it's probably two new engines, because they probably need to be looked at. And also, in the worst case scenario, the engine can fail, or both engines could fail. Because normally, if you've opened one, you open the other.
Yeah.
Which is just a very, very serious thing.
So this happened to BA. They took off both the cowlings, ripped off. They had hydraulic problems, and it's a real serious problem.
It's a real serious thing, because all these very critical lines are attached to the engine in that area, so any damage is going to not just damage one thing, it's going to damage multiple things, which is what it did. They even had a small fire, I believe, for a while, because one of the fuel lines, and just from a latch. And that's why you have to have a look underneath the aircraft.
So where's the latch then?
So you can see the latches quite clearly here, but you have to get really quite low. So you normally, I put my hand on the engine and sort of kneel all the way down to have a look underneath. Some people get on their hands and knees. I'm not quite that dedicated.
Yeah, not that dedicated.
As long as I can see that they're not, undone, then I'm fine.
So you could see how these could be quite easily missed, though.
Very easily. Very easily missed, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty crucial safety item.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of how they've taken this seriously, the new aircraft with the Neo engines, they've completely redesigned the system. So you have a little flag that pops out the side of the engine, and it also mentions it in the flight deck that they're unlatched.
Oh, wow.
So they've done something to basically make it so that will never happen again.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. But for now, if you've got an old school A320 like we
you have to look at the latches.
You need to look at the latches. All right, okay. And then just the general condition of the engine and everything else and making sure that it all looks good.
Exactly.
All right, so then what, just heading out the wing and just checking the rest of it?
It's the same thing, looking at the slats, checking everything's there, checking the fuel cap's left on, which it is. And then we can see there's lots of little access panels that go along here, but this is just for maintenance guys to get inside of the wing for various maintenance.
This is the right side.
Yeah.
I'm going back to Captain Ashcraft's old there ain't no port red left.
Yeah.
So we're on the right side, so that's the starboard side, which is green. So this is the green, this is the navigation light that we talked about, yeah?
That's it, and we're just looking to see if it's on, really. That's all we're looking for at this point.
Okay, which it is.
So it's all good, yeah. So what we're looking at there is we've got the aileron, so that's what we're looking at there, and then at the very end of the wing, we have they call it a raked wingtip fence.
Okay.
That's what they call it.
So the aileron is flap down because there's no hydraulic power.
That's what it is, yeah. There's no hydraulic pressurization, so it's just going to sit down, and the other side will be the same as well.
Okay, so when we apply some hydraulics and get things going, that will lift itself up.
Exactly, yeah.
Here's a question for you. Let's talk about the fairing. The fairings, first of all, do these hide the flap mechanism?
That's it. I think they're called flat boat track mechanisms or something like that. So basically, it looks like a boat.
It does.
So that's why they call it a flat boat. Anyway, and what they do is they hide the mechanism that's behind them. And interestingly, actually, these get worn out quite quickly because the amount of, you put the flaps out. And if you put the flaps out at a high speed, it wears them out quicker. And they're 290,000 euros each.
Wow.
Each.
My
and
God.
there's a lot on each wing.
Yeah. We're going to talk about this later.
Yeah.
About extending the flaps at certain speeds. The slower you can do that,
yes, exactly,
the better.
Yep. And that's why Airbus recommend you do it a bit slower than just the limit.
It's much nicer and kinder to the airframe.
Yes.
And it's going to save Eurojet some money.
Exactly.
If we can do it a bit later.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
All right. And the little stick sticking out of them.
Yeah, so the little sticks there, they're called the static wicks. And therefore, in case we get hit by lightning, it needs to it has an easy path to try and dissipate. And it uses these static wicks to dissipate the electricity to the air, basically.
The main landing gear. Look at the colour of it. My God.
I know, it's amazing the amount of carbon and brake dust and everything that gets sort of stuck on here. But really, we're looking for the same thing as the nose wheel: general condition, quality of the tyres, and we're also looking to see if the little guard at the end is in good condition. That's it, really.
Okay, all right. Is there some way of checking the brakes?
Yeah, there is. What you can do is there's a little stick, but I don't think we have it modelled here, unfortunately, and they're called brake wear indicators. Okay. And they basically show you that the bigger the stick, the more brake pads you have left, the smaller the less. And it has a little marking that means if it's less than this, then they must be replaced.
Now, is there any indication inside the flight deck of the brakes being worn?
There's nothing in there, so you kind of have to, when you do the walk around, you kind of know which ones are worn, which ones aren't. They should all still work fairly similarly, but there's no indication in the flight deck.
So it isn't like your car, whereas if the brakes wear, you get a warning light.
No.
You don't get one on an Airbus.
No, you don't. No, it's your responsibility to check them, but it's also the maintenance people when they do their nightly stuff. They go, okay, that's pretty close. We'll do a replacement.
Each brake application, so every time you push the brakes on an Airbus, costs how much?
You wouldn't believe it. It's £35.
Okay, so £35, which is, I don't know, nearly $50?
Yeah, it's about $50.
About $50 or for nearly €50, something like that. Wow.
Every single time. And part of the reason for that is the Airbus was one of the first aircraft to have carbon brakes. So it's carbon ceramic discs, carbon ceramic pads themselves.
Which if you've ever bought for your car, you'll know how expensive they are.
And they've only come around in the recent years. So this was in 1987.
Wow.
So they are very, very, very expensive.
So when you're taxiing out, every time you touch the brakes, that's $50 from Eurojet's operating budget. And I guess when you land, if you think about the landing brake application, how hard that is.
It's got to be more. It's got to be at least double, triple.
It's several. So basically, every landing is probably a couple of $100 in just brakes.
Yeah.
That's before we put fuel on.
I know.
Before the pilots.
Yeah.
Before we buy the airplane. How do airlines make money?
I don't know.
See, there's another cargo door here. This is the bulk cargo door. So, do we have 3 cargo compartments on an A320?
Yeah, we've got the main cargo door at the front, this one, and then we've also got the bulk cargo door.
Okay, so what's the difference?
So the main difference is the main cargo areas, they're going to be used all the time. So they're the ones that you're going to put most of the bags in, whatever you want. But the bulk cargo is sort of the last minute items that you don't want to bother opening the main cargo door, but you want to just get it in there so you can go, and it'll go in there.
So let's say somebody turns up late and they've got maybe, I don't know, a pram or a huge big bag that's too big for the cabin. Then they open this door and they throw it in.
Put it on the load sheet as a last minute change, and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you can use, again, there's a little bit beyond the scope of this program to talk about all the different options and stuff you can get with an Airbus, but let's just give it a bit of love. You can put containers in there.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So this is, and you can actually see this in GSX, where all the baggage goes in a container, and then the single container, or several containers, that can get slid inside the airplane, and that's it. So you normally see this with big aircraft like the 777 and things like that. The 737, which is obviously comparable to the A320, can't do that.
No, it can't do that, and its cargo compartment is significantly smaller because it's such a low down design. But you can do that. You can put the containers in the A320, which is nice. It keeps commonality between the different airlines, so an operator that uses them can just keep using them on their short haul fleet. Okay,
but generally speaking, I'm guessing with kind of low cost carriers like Eurojet, we don't use containers. That's generally something that big legacy airlines use.
Yeah, and for them it makes more sense because when they're loading a container on a larger aircraft, they can put them organised beforehand, but we're just taking the bags that are at the gate and putting them in the hold, and that's it. So generally you've not got that much cargo.
Okay, so we're just going to throw the bags and stack them up in the cargo hold.
Yes, it's
we're at nearly the back of the airplane, and we can see this big door, and it says warning outflow valve, and it's open. What does this do?
So the outflow valve was really, really important. It's to do with the pressurization system. So with the pressurization system, a certain amount of air comes in and a certain amount's got to go out. So
because otherwise the plane would explode.
It's like a balloon. You keep blowing up, it's going to pop eventually.
Yeah.
So this regulates the amount of air that comes out. And on the ground, it should be fully open like you see now.
Okay. Now, so there's not really any situation. There are a couple of things, and we'll come back to that when it might be closed. But generally speaking, on the ground, this is going to be wide open.
It should be wide open. If it's not wide open, then that's a trigger for you to think something's going on. And
Now, there are situations when we need to close this.
Yeah.
Like, was it de-icing?
De-icing, yeah.
De-icing, a few other things where we don't want stuff getting inside.
That's right, yeah.
If we're being sprayed with de-icing fluid, we don't want that getting inside the airplane.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, where we are now, that should be open.
Should be open, yeah.
We've got a couple more access panels at the back here. What are these for?
So what this is for is this whole access panel is quite large and it opens up, and it's for maintenance on the auxiliary power unit, which is a very small jet engine in the tail that runs all the stuff that we don't really need to run off the main engines.
It doesn't power the aircraft. It's not used to drive the aircraft along. It's just used for stuff on the ground.
Yeah, it's just used to run air conditioning, some electrical systems on the ground, and that's what all it's used for, really.
This big nozzle, this is the outlet from the APU.
Yeah, that's right. This is the outlet at the end there. You can see it's quite a large outlet because obviously there's still quite a lot of air and heat and everything that needs to get taken out, and it just comes out the back of the aircraft there.
And where does the air come into the APU?
Just below that, that's where the flap is.
Okay, and that flap opens up and that's where the air comes in.
That's where it comes in. Yeah.
So we'll show you that. And then presumably then round the other side, it's basically just a carbon copy of everything that we've already talked about, right?
Yeah, what we're looking at here is we're just looking at general sort of condition, and the only thing that's worth looking at is if you look at the tail, and then we look at they call it the THS. We're looking to see if it's on 0, because we have a load of markings on the left side there that show you how much trim is set. If it's not at 0, that's one of those trigger points you go, something's wrong. Because it should be, because it's reset on every landing. Okay, so the trim will reset itself. Mm-hmm. So unlike, if you remember back to the Dash 8, I can't quite remember about the 777,
because I suppose with the 777 you land and you get off and you go to the beach.
yeah.
With the A320 you're going to go fly somewhere else again.
Yeah.
But the Dash 8 certainly not. You would have to reset it for every takeoff. You would have to reset it from the landing trim.
Yeah.
The A320, beautiful,
resets
does it
itself,
for you.
job done.
So as long as we see that little, we've got the little red marks there and a 0.
Yeah.
It should be pointing at the 0.
That's it. Like it's just one of those general condition things to see that's not right, and it could be someone set the trim or it didn't reset, and then it's just one of those things to look at.
So if you get on an A320 and you board on the rear steps, you can actually see this.
Yeah, exactly.
You can check it for yourself.
Yeah, you can go, hey guys.
You can go, guys, the trimmable horizontal stabilizer is broken.
Yeah, it's not set. Did you know that? No one will be like, oh, I didn't.
Now, here's a little question for you. You'll notice this all along the fuselage on this side. These little triangles. See the little triangle there?
I see them, yeah.
These little triangles, what do they do?
That's a good question. It's for when it's in construction. So they've built the fuselage, and you can see it's made from different panels, different pieces.
Yeah.
They put it together, and they need to see if it's lined up. So they have these little triangles so they can sort of step back, use an instrument of some sort, and see, yep, that's all lined up, and that works. So it's within specification, and they can let it leave. So it's just for the construction aspect of it.
Okay, and then, but why do they leave them once the aircraft's built? I mean, obviously, the aircraft gets repainted, but they're still there. Are they then used subsequently in maintenance?
I think when you do they call it a D check, which is basically you strip the airplane down to nothing. I would imagine they probably look at them again and go, yep, it's still within specification.
So if you fly a fleet of really old Airbuses, they all fly a little bit differently. Some of them maybe have had a few heavy landings and things like that.
The one thing that's interesting, though, is they actually all fly the same because of the fly-by-wire. So I know that, with the Dash 8, every single one, some of the operators have a different characteristic. One's good at trimming, one's got this. Every Airbus flies pretty much exactly the same. It doesn't mean that they're not physically slightly different. It just means the fly-by-wire is masking it.
Of course, because the computers are all programmed the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is quite nice, actually.
Yeah, no, I guess it is. All right, now, we can see there's a little box here which says escape slide. This is a slide that pops out and comes over the back of the wing?
Yeah, that's right. So if you need to evacuate for those over-wing exits, you'll pull the door open, and either of the doors will immediately then trigger this slide. They're left permanently armed. So they're permanently armed. Yeah.
All right. Now, in the, say, the 737, they're not. So on the ground, if you open the emergency exit, the little door, then nothing's going to happen.
No, yeah.
In an Airbus, if you open that on the ground, the slide will pop.
It's going to pop.
And it'll be very expensive and embarrassing for everyone.
Exactly, yeah.
Again, so as an Airbus passenger, I've often wondered this, that you have these little hooks, I suppose, aren't they? What's the deal with these? I've always seen these on every Airbus, and I've wondered what they were.
It's a funny one because you can imagine that they add quite a bit of drag.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but considering the airplane is designed to be as smooth as possible, having a big metal hook isn't the greatest.
On either side, there's two of them.
Yeah, and on the part of the wing that produces most of the lift. So, Anyway, what they're for is if that slide fails to inflate, there's a little hook, and you can hook them onto the little latch there, and then you can throw the slide off the back. People can hold it manually, and then they slide down.
Okay.
I really don't know how many times that's ever going to be used, but still.
Well, we'll see. So actually there's a very old Airbus video, so let's just have a look at this, and you can actually see this in motion. So
I'm not sure I'd like to try it.
So there you go. So you see there's a guy from the 80s.
Yeah.
And there he's got his rope, and it goes to this little hook, and then so these dudes, they hold the slide, which is deflated because it's obviously malfunctioned, and then people slide down it. So you're kind of relying on like a burning aeroplane for people to hold the slide for you.
I think I'd rather just jump off the wing.
Yeah,
if I'm honest.
I guess so. So if you ever wonder what these little things are, they're basically just they're latching points for the rope.
Yeah, for the rope as well. And the one that's further out, the rope can go through it and then back through and kind of create like a little way to get down. But that's what they're for.
All right, so then that kind of concludes the walk around, and we're kind of back at the steps, and we're kind of back where we began.
Exactly where we began, yeah.
And now by this time, obviously, we've taken a long time to kind of sit and discuss and talk about a lot of the different things. Normally, in the real aeroplane, how long does this process actually take you?
5 minutes.
Okay.
So, like, you can imagine in the sim, if you want to try and replicate the real world time, you just basically moving around the aircraft. And about as quick as you can sort of walk around the aircraft, it's as quick as you do the walk around. There are a few things that you might pause and go, that's fine, then move on. It doesn't take too long.
Okay.
It actually, funny enough, takes me less time to do a walk around for a 320 than my old Cessna 152.
Yeah, of course.
It does,
yeah.
because there's less things to actually really check, because maintenance have checked it, and it's a general inspection, not so much a check.
So, in the real world, by the time we get back on the aircraft, the other guy will already be deep into the cockpit setup.
Yeah, normally you're about into the setup of the flight management system. You're normally about that far.
Okay, all right. So this is what we're going to do now. And we're back in a very, very hot flight deck.
It does feel hot in here. I can feel the heat.
Absolutely, yeah. So look, I'm going to nip to the galley and go and grab us a couple of cold mineral waters, and then we'll continue with the setup, and we'll get some air conditioning going in here.
Sounds good.